Hello, dear friends. I'd like to say some words that I said at the Shayarot, the synagogue on Shayarot on Shabbat parshat VaYishlah. And it's about a very unusual verse in the Torah. Because you see, when Rivka left the house of Lavan, her brother, and Bethuel, her father, and they said to her, "Are you sure you want to go with this man?" And she says, "Yes, I will go." And it says that they sent her with her meineket. Meineket, from the word yunika, is usually a woman who helps the matriarch. And this type of help uh, sometimes is translated as a nurse, the one who could nurse the child just in case. Of course, she would have to have her own child too to be able to nurse the child. It could also be metaphorical, which she helps bring up the child together with the mother. And it says that Rivka, who was very young at the time, was sent off with her nurse. Now, Meineket could be, of course, somebody who nursed her if she was that young. Rashi claims she was very young, as opposed to, let's say, Ibn Ezra. But it could also be just somebody who was her helper, her maid, and whatever you want to call it, somebody who helps her in the house. But we do not know her name, though, this Meineket. But in the part this week's parshat VaYishlah, we have a very unusual verse, and I will point out the verse here on the Zoom so that you can see it. It says, "Vatamot Dvorah meineket Rivka." Vatamot Dvorah meineket Rivka. Let's take it again. Here it is, chapter 35. And Devorah, Rebecca's nurse, died and was buried under the oak, the Alon, below Beit El. So that area was called Alon Bachut, which means the crying oak. Who is this Rivka, who's mentioned for the first time when she dies? So as I said, she is mentioned with not by name, but as somebody who accompanied Rivka. So that would mean she accompanied Rivka's whole life. Now, assuming that she must have been older than Rivka, because if she is the Meineket, the nurse of Rivka, leaving Rivka, and Rivka's a young woman when she goes to meet Isaac, that means that Rebecca was older. We're also told, just a few verses later, that Rebecca dies. And so it doesn't say Rebecca dies. This is understood by the rabbis. So the rabbis assume that Rebecca dies. But if Rebecca dies, why is it not mentioned? And why here does Yaakov build a monument, which he calls Alon Bachut, the crying oak, for Devorah? Why not for his mother? Why would he even consider building a monument to Devorah? So the commentaries are puzzled by this. Some of the commentaries suggest that actually this monument was for his mother. But since his mother died and was not around, and Rebecca was, so this was by honoring Rebecca, by honoring Devorah, he was honoring Rivka, his mother. That's an assumption. But why did Devorah come in the first place? So Rashi says Devorah came because sent by Rivka to tell him enough is enough, come home. You've been away for too long, 20 years in the house of Lavan. But Rivka dies. And so he gives this monument, this honor to Devorah in his mother's name. Another possibility, of course, if Rivka died just after this or around the same time, maybe Rivka was already ill, and maybe Devorah came to tell also Yaakov that your mother is ill. And therefore he builds this monument, which was a double monument both for Devorah and for Rivka. It's also possible, if we want to deal with other possibilities, that maybe Devorah came to tell him that Rivka died. That's slightly different than the way Rashi's position, because these things are not clear. And why didn't he go back? So obviously he didn't go back. Maybe it happened suddenly, etc. So these are all questions about Devorah and why all of a sudden Devorah has this verse out of nowhere, when until now she was a nobody. She was totally unmentioned and almost unrecognizable in the narrative of the Torah. So I'd like to develop an idea here that I heard years ago from a good friend of mine, musician Yoshua Rochman, and developed it over the years. To understand this, what Devorah is doing here, we have to go back a little bit to the beginning. The Terach family. If you look in chapter 11, Eile Toldot Terach, these are the children of Terach. Terach, of course, had Avram, whose name is changed to Avraham by God. Nachor and Haran. Nachor has the same name as his grandfather. And Haran has a child whose name is Lot. Haran dies during Terach's lifetime. There's an interesting midrash, Rashi brings it. Why does Haran die during Terach's lifetime? What exactly happened? So the midrash says that there was a fellow whose name was Nimrod, who's mentioned in the text, and Nimrod was an idol worshiper and a very activist idol worshiper. And of course, Terach was an idol worshiper too, but Nimrod was an activist. And when he finds out that Avram is breaking the idols of Terach, because Avram believes in the one God, he gets angry. He goes to Avraham and he says to him, "What's going on? Who do you believe in?" Avram says, "I believe only in the one God." He says, "You can't do that. I'm going to throw you into a fiery furnace if you don't change your mind." Avram says, "That's okay." So he throws him into the fiery furnace. I don't know if he said that's okay, but throws him into the fiery furnace, and Avram comes out alive. In the meantime, he had gone to Haran and asked him what he thought. And he went to Nachor. Nachor said, "I'm an idol worshiper." And then he returned to Haran. And Haran said, "Wait, I want to see what happens to Avram." So he sees that Avram comes out alive in the fiery furnace. So Haran, the third child, says, "Okay, I'm with Avraham. I also believe in the one God." So Nimrod says, "Okay, I'm throwing you into the fiery furnace." Throws him to the fiery furnace, and Haran dies. Therefore, it says that Haran died during his father's lifetime. The Midrash, of course, has its enigmatic ways of explaining different puzzling issues in the Torah, and sometimes these enigmas have to be understood. If we talk about the three children of Terach, we have 3 points of view. We have Nachor, who is a diehard idol worshiper, like his father Terach. We have Avraham, who's the diehard monotheist. And there you have Haran, who's not sure. He's the skeptic. He goes back and forth. He deliberates. If Avram's the winner, okay, there's one God. If Nachor is the winner, okay, that's what we were doing beforehand. He's a little bit wishy-washy. As later on, Elijah the prophet will say to the people of the northern kingdom, Ad matai tifsuchu al shnei hasiipim? For how long are you going to jump on two sides of the river? You have to decide either you're for God or if you're the Baal. So Haran is the one who's undecided. And his indecisiveness continues with his children too. So he has 3 children, Lot, and 2 daughters, Yiska and Milcah. Rashi, according to the Midrash, says that Yiska is Sarah, who eventually Avraham will marry, and Milcah, it says in the text, is married by Nachor, older brother. I go back again to the text. So it says that Avram and Nachor took wives. The name of Avram's wife was Sarai, and Nachor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Yiska. And as I said, Rashi in the name of the Midrash says that Yiska is actually Sarai. And Sarai didn't have children. And then Avram takes Lot, right, who is a son of Haran. Here it says his grandson. It's actually his nephew. Right. So, excuse me, Terach, it's Terach's grandson, of course. But I'm just pointing out that Terach takes Avraham and Lot, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law. And they go from Ur Kasdim towards Canaan. Then Terach dies. Avraham goes with Lot, Canaan. So Avraham's really trying to take command of the Terach household. He's already lost Milcah to his brother Nachor, who is a pagan. But he has taken, according to the Midrash, Yiska, who is Sarai, to be with him as a monotheist. And now he wants to grab Lot. In parshat Lech Lecha, he's unsuccessful. Finally, they don't get along. So he says to Lot, go right, go left, just tell me where you're going, and I'll go the other way. And Lot goes to Sodom. Of course, when Lot gets into trouble because there is a war going on, Avram saves him against the 4 kings. So Avram still cares about Lot, but they do part their ways. And as we know, Lot has 2 daughters and the story of Ammon and Moab. Now, getting back to Nachor's family, Nachor has a son whose name is Betuel. Now, we don't know about others, but these are the ones we know about. And Betuel has a son whose name is Lavan, and a daughter whose name is Rivka. Now, Sarah is also interested in their family rejoining monotheism. And she sends Yitzchak. It's not really she sends. Abraham sends his servant to take somebody from Lavan's house, from Betuel's house, I should say. And that somebody becomes Rivka. And Rivka then marries Yitzchak. So by that, part of Nachor's family is being redeemed in the family of Avraham. And then Lavan has 2 daughters, Leah and Rachel. And then Rivka says to Jacob, I want you to go back to my household, to my brother Lavan. He has 2 daughters there. Choose a wife. And Yaakov does. And he actually chooses Rachel, if you remember, Rachel, but he gets both of them from Lavan, Leah and Rachel. In this, even though he loved Rachel more, he's now incorporated the 2 daughters of Lavan back into Avram's house, and they become monotheists. And Yaakov actually realizes this, because when Lavan runs after him, when he leaves with his wives and his children, Lavan says, why did you run away in the middle of the night like that? And Jacob says, because I was afraid that you would take my wives, meaning that Jacob started to realize that both of them were important in the household, not just Rachel, but also Leah. But the point is that Jacob now has finished the work of bringing most of the house of Nachor, the descendant of Terach, and Haran, which I'll mention in a moment, back into the fold. Lot was sort of saved by Avraham, so that brings part of it. But then Lot has daughters, Ammon and Moab. Ammon and Moab will only be redeemed generations later by Ruth, the Moabite, who will come back and marry Boaz, and from her will be descended King David. But at least Nachor's family is redeemed by Abraham, the die-hard pagan, and redeemed by Rebekah, marrying Isaac, Rachel and Leah, marrying Jacob, and this now brings them back into the fold. Yaakov realizes that he's now redeeming the household of Avraham. As it says, Yaakov asher padat Avraham. It says Jacob who redeemed Abraham. Well, the Talmud says on that verse, doesn't mean Jacob who redeemed Abraham. Jacob who redeemed Abraham, according to that, is talking about the fact that he redeemed him from the difficulty of bearing so many children, because Jacob had 13 children, Abraham only had two. Asher Padayat Avraham is the verse. This is a verse that we find in Isaiah 29:22. And Koamar Shemel Beit Yaakov, the house of Jacob, Asher Padat Abraham, who redeemed Abraham. Lo atay yivosh Yaakov, do not be ashamed, etc. But I'm explaining here Padat Abraham, that Jacob actually finishes the work of Abraham to bring house of Nachor under the wings of monotheism. Now Yaakov also realizes this is not a simple task. He has to build up the house of Israel. Because remember, Abraham had two children and Ishmael went off in a different direction than Isaac. Fortunately, Isaac worked for years to bring Ishmael back. And Isaac Yitzchak also has two children, Yaakov and Esav also takes a different path than Yaakov, even though they're from the same woman and father. So Yaakov realizes that building up the house of Israel is not a simple thing. And a lot of work has to be done. And after 20 years in the house of Lavan, he realizes, the angel says, I want you to go back to Beit El. Make an altar. Right? God says to Jacob, arise, go to Beit El and remain there. Build an altar to the God who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau. It's time to go back. It's time to recalibrate. It's time to go back to the direction that you were supposed to go in. Things happened in Lavan's house. It took a long time. It was difficult. It was hard working with him. It was hard keeping away from his influence. And Yaakov knows this. And Yaakov says to his household, and all of them who are with him, rid yourselves of the foreign gods in your midst, purify yourselves, change your clothes, and let us rise up and go to Beit El. I will build a new altar there to God who answered me when I was in my distress, who had been with me when I had gone. And this is a surprising part. They gave to Jacob all their foreign gods and the rings that were in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak. He calls it the terebinth. That was near Shechem. Well, in Hebrew, actually, alon is an oak, and elah, he translates it as a terebinth, another type of tree, near Shechem. What were the foreign gods that they were carrying? Whenever you have people coming and joining into the Abrahamic family, they come with some of their own cultural packages. And they have to be taught to leave it behind. And it takes time. And Yaakov realized this. And I guess tried to turn another eye sometimes, but then it becomes too much and you have to recalibrate and say, friends, get rid of it. This is the new direction. And realize that the foreign gods don't work anymore. The foreign gods are all about you. The one God is all about a relationship with God. And this is what happens. When they're able to reach that point, then the fear of God fell on the cities around them and they were not pursued, which means all of them became influenced by Jacob's level. And they were able to go to Beit El with all the people with him, which means his family and others who had joined Yaakov. They became a whole community. And they rebuilt the altar in Beit El, where God had appeared to Jacob when he ran away from his brother. And then comes the verse. Devorah Meneket Rivka dies and buried under the oak below Beit El. What is this? Because if you remember, Rivka is the first one to join the Abrahamic family to leave as being the daughter of Bethuel and the sister of Lavan and the granddaughter of Nachor. She's now leaving into the Abrahamic family, redeeming this pagan, meaning she was a pagan from a pagan roots, but she wanted to be part of the Abrahamic family. And when they said to her as a young girl, will you go? She said yes, because she knew exactly what she wanted. And she herself becomes a prophet, because it says, Vayomer Hashem la, and God said to her, there are two nations in your womb. So Rivka is the first. And how is Devorah here? Devorah comes from Lavan's family. She is a worker there. Most probably she was a pagan too, but she was probably influenced by Rivka over the years. So Devorah becomes the symbol of the influence that comes in from Nachor's family. She becomes the symbol. And even if she rectified herself, she becomes that symbol. And everything that came into Abraham's family, meaning Jacob's family, from Nachor, was purified and rededicated. And this is the term Devorah. Devorah is a bee. A bee is a not kosher animal, what we call an tameh. It's not a pure animal. You can't eat it. But from the bee, you have pure honey, which you can eat. So the bee has the power of transformation. You can't eat the bee, but you can eat the product of the bee. In other words, this Devorah, this Meineket, she is part of that transformation, transforming somebody who came from a background of paganism and idol worship into the house of the belief in the one God. She's also called Meineket. Now, Meineket, which is translated as a nurse, literally from the word Yenika, which means to suckling, like a baby who's a suckling. And again, the baby suckles milk. And milk comes from the blood of the cow, which we're not allowed to eat, and turns into milk, which we are allowed to drink and eat. We make it into cheese. So again, both of them represent transformation, both the honey and the milk. This is, by the way, how Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook used to explain why the land of Israel, the Holy Land, is called Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, the land of milk and honey, because milk and honey represent a transformation. The honey which comes out from the bee, which we cannot eat, the milk which comes from the blood of the cow, which we cannot drink. So these are foods of transformation. The land of Israel has this power of transformation. So Jacob had this power of transformation. He was able to bring people from a pagan background into the belief of the one God. And he had that ability. And once they achieve it, Devorah dies, because she's the last remnant left over coming in from the house of Laban in that sense. This Meineket, this feeding, this suckling from the house of Laban is now finished. It's now all been transformed into the belief in the one God. That's the death of Devorah, which becomes a very significant moment in Yaakov's life. And at the point in which he feels, I can now go back to Beit El and look at Beit El straight in the face and appear before God and said, I'm now the Yisrael, the Israel that you wanted me to be. It's a very monumental moment in the life of Yaakov. Shalom, shalom.